Hello. Here we are. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. If you want to introduce yourselves very quickly in the chat, I'm always happy to see who I'm talking to. Hi, Alessandro. Hi, everyone. Just like last week, a lot of names I recognize, some that I don't, some new people. Hi, everyone. Hi, Chiara. So as usual, I'll just give another minute for everyone to join, just to give everybody a chance to join. How are you feeling today, guys? Hi, Francesca. I can only imagine how tired and, yeah, anxious you must be feeling right now. Yeah. I get that. And I hope that today's lesson is at least going to make you feel a bit more prepared, at least. Yeah, tired. I can imagine you're feeling shattered now, but silver linings. The exam is next week, isn't it? Next week or the week after. So, shall we get started then? Right. Let me share my screen with you because we've got a lot of ground to cover today. All right. If your microphone doesn't work, that's not a problem because you won't be asked to speak. But you will be asked to contribute in the chat. So let me just share my screen with you and let me know if you can see my screen. Here we are. Can you just let me know if you can see my screen? In the chat, because I can read you in the chat. Yes, okay, great. Right, okay, so here we are. We're going to be doing this session that will run for about an hour and a half, maybe slightly longer today, if you have to make plans. So we're going to be looking at some quizzes, just like we did last Saturday. We'll be looking at 35 quizzes on the B2 English topic, so to speak. And I am your trainer. Most of you know me already. I am the founder of Language Ed, and I am a researcher in language education for the University of Leeds and the British Council. And I am an experienced teacher trainer and English trainer. So this is who will be teaching you today. Remember as well that the video recording of today's session will be available on the YouTube channel of Language Ed. So this is the channel. Remember to subscribe if you want to receive a notification when the video is up. So this is where you'll find both the video recording and also the slides for today. But I'm going to share them now on Zoom as well. So just a few pointers for today's lesson. As you know, there will be 4 possible options for each question, only one of which is correct. At the exam, you'll get 0 points for your wrong answer, so always give an answer because the worst case scenario is you'll get 0 points. And there will be 2 points for each right answer for a total of 100 points. If in today's session you struggle reading the questions on video, please open the PDF of the slides, which I'm going to send you in a minute. If you don't understand something, please ask. Please send a question in the chat, and I'll do my best to address it. If you want, on the other hand, to look up the meaning of words by yourself, you can do this during the webinar, looking at, for example, websites like wordreference.com. So that might be an alternative way if you don't want to ask me a direct question. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second and I'm going to share the link to the slides. Okay, so you can download them and you can look at them on your own screen if you don't want to look at Zoom, just because there might be quite a bit of text. And if you're watching this as a recording, you will find the slides in the video description here on YouTube. Okay. So going back to our lesson, what are we doing today? So as you know, you will have these 5 questions, these 5 multiple choice questions on your knowledge of English at a B2 level of the SEFR, the Quadro Comune Europeo di Riferimento per le Lingue. And what does this mean? Well, essentially it means that you're supposed to be an independent user of the language at a B2 level. And that means things like being able to understand the main ideas of complex texts on both concrete and abstract topics, interacting with a degree of fluency and spontaneity that makes regular interactions with users of the target language possible without imposing strain. So this means that understanding you is not difficult because you can produce clear and detailed text on a wide variety of subjects and give explanations. So why have I underlined these things in yellow? Because really, we don't know what they're going to test at the concorso exam, but we can wonder what they can plausibly test. And based on the concorso ordinario from 2020, what they did was test reading comprehension, so content comprehension, Lexis in context. So as we will see, this is similar to content comprehension in the sense that you get a text and then you have to answer questions on some specific words and the meaning of specific words in a text. And then there were questions about grammar and Lexis. So these were more decontextualized. So you didn't have a text to refer to in this case. And so essentially, they won't be testing your speaking or listening comprehension, nothing like that, because this is a computer-based exam. They will be testing those things at the oral exam, of course, but we can talk about that at the end of the session. But this is what we expect. Now, we don't know if this exam is going to have questions exactly like these, because this is the first concorso exam of its kind. So we don't really know. But we can plausibly imagine that they won't go much further than testing your grammar, your Lexis, and your reading comprehension. Okay. And what we'll discuss today are questions from the concorso ordinario, from the last concorso ordinario, which the ministry has made available recently at this link, which you have in the slides that I sent you in the chat. Okay. And I'm going to send the links at the end of the session as well. And if you're watching the recording, the link is going to be in the video description. So let's start straight away with part 1, content comprehension. What does this mean? You'll have questions in which you'll be required to understand the context of a text. This might mean, for example, understanding the author's attitudes and opinions, and we will have an example of this, or understanding facts, so more factual information. And you'll notice that I've explicitly pointed out facts have to be based on the text, not your background knowledge. And this is something that we have to remember. The answer to the question needs to be in the text. The texts at the last concorso for the content comprehension were between 65 and 100 words, so fairly long, not too long, but fairly long. And they were more or less specialized because if you remember, the last concorso ordinario was specific for a different classe di concorso, and this year it's not. So we don't really know what to expect. So the texts may be more or less specialized. So they may be more generic about education, or they may be more specific about more specific subjects. And we're going to look at examples of both. Right, so here we are. It's this is the first question that we're going to talk about. And what we're going to do is, normally at the exam, you would have on average 2 minutes per question. Now, to speed things up a bit today, I'm going to give you for each question a minute and a half, about a minute and a half to read the question and think of the answer and put it in the chat for me. Okay, so off you go. Okay, I can see there are answers coming in. Very good. Okay, let's move on and look at the actual answer. Okay, so it was C. As you can see, I've highlighted in yellow where in the text we can find the answer. And it's here. For example, it isn't always necessary to use your real name. So looking at the wrong options, why were they wrong? A was wrong because the opposite is true. It's better to be cautious about the amount of information, personal information that you share. B, make sure they register correctly. I've characterized this as irrelevant and using a so-called word hook. So what they do sometimes in these questions is they give you a word, in this case, the word register, to lead you to look for that word, maybe because it's a longer word or a more elegant word or a more formal word. They want you to go looking for that in the text, and then you get confused. But in this case, the word register is in the text, but it doesn't say anything about registering correctly. So this is simply an irrelevant option. And D is not entirely true in the sense that shopping is mentioned, as you can see, in the introduction, but the writer doesn't explicitly advise people who join an online community, and that's what we see in the question, to be careful about online shopping. So it has to be fully true. The whole option has to be true. The whole sentence has to be true. All right. But well done, guys. Let's move on to the next one. Can you guys see? Serena is saying that something got blocked. What happened? Okay, right. So that was a minute 15, by the way. And most people have given me their answer. So let's look at the correct answer, which was indeed A. And as you can see, we've got the right answer. We've got, sorry, the reference in the text highlighted in yellow again, had massive brickwork walls, was enclosed by brickwork walls about 10 kilometers in circumference. Why were the other options incorrect? Was Gilgamesh's hometown? Well, it says supposedly built by Gilgamesh, so he might have built it, but we don't know that it was his hometown. It's not written anywhere. Jamdat Nasser is only mentioned as a period, so we don't have any other information about this. And then we have was destroyed by excavations. I would argue that this is again a word hook because excavation is quite an unusual word. So they wanted to go looking for it, and it's mentioned, yes, but only to say that these excavations revealed the existence of successive cities. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I'm again going to give you another minute and a half, roughly. May I suggest that if you finish early, you take the opportunity to make a note of one word or expression or structure from the text that you want to remember, that you want to keep in your mind, so that you make good use of the time that we have available today to learn as much as you can. So for example, in this case, if I were you, I would probably note down to be enclosed by, or perhaps the word brickwork as well. Moving on to the next one. Okay, that's about a minute and a half, roughly, again. So let's look at the right answer, which, as many of you guessed, was B. Well, not guessed, got right, was B. So B helps you realize the kind of work you like. So in the text, the best way to see what catches your interest. These texts are a good source as well of language that you might want to hear, that you might want to learn, because, as you will have seen, they're all authentic texts from newspapers, for example, or or a number of websites. Okay, so they contain good language as well. For example, catches your interest. Option A, can never develop the skills you need, is completely irrelevant. Where does he even talk about skills? It doesn't. Same with C, feels like you're not learning much. And then D helps you navigate hostile work environments. And I would argue here the word hook is the environment, because there is a word environment here in the third line. But it says nothing about at all about hostile working environments. If you wanna put in the chat what interesting language maybe you have noted down from each of these texts, that would also be welcome because it's a way of sharing it as well. Yeah, so Julia is saying to catch interest, for example. Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the next one, shall we? Okay, I've given you a bit more time with this one because I've seen vastly different answers in the chat. So let me give you the right answer, which was indeed D. This one was a bit trickier, I think, and we're going to look at why now. So here is where you find the answer. So the question was the real number of home-educated children, and here I put careful because this could have been phrased like true number or actual number. So it says real number like it does in the text where it says, but the real number is likely to be higher. But it could have been phrased in a different way. So be careful with synonyms. A can be certainly known by local authorities, not true, and this is something that I think nobody chose as an option anyway. B is between 34,000 and 48,000 children. Some of you chose this one. This isn't true. A, because official numbers state that it was 48,000 children in 2016-17, but the article anyway is from 2018, so it wouldn't have been true regardless. But simply, it was 34,000 children according to official numbers of recorded of children in the record. And then it became 48,000 in 2016-17, but it's not between 34 and 48 in any case. All right. The one that I found was the trickiest was C, does not include pupils withdrawn from school. Something different is true here because the text says this only covers children who have been removed, so withdrawn, so that's the word withdrawn, from school. So be careful with double negatives as well, because withdraw is obviously a negative word. So the real number, which is the non-official number in a way, is likely to be higher, and it will also include not just the children who were removed from school, but also the children who never entered school. So children who are never put into school. Because the official numbers will include only the children that entered a school, but then got removed for whatever reason. So this one was a bit trickier. If you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. Okay, if not, let's move on to our next question. Okay, okay. Let's have a look at the answer now. It is B indeed, as many of you pointed out. Very good. A snake was seen moving through the overhead lights, moving above passengers on a plane, traveling to Borneo Island. It's a synonymous phrase. So the overhead lights, and as you have probably noticed, this was the opposite of option D, moving under the seat of some passengers at the back of the plane. So the exact opposite is true. Under versus above. Okay. Option A is irrelevant, but also the opposite is true because it's described as very rare in the text. Okay. And then we have option C, which I thought was clever, by a passenger who was having an extremely bad nightmare, because it's one of the first words that you read, and it might work as a bit of a hook for your eyes, right? Your eyes go there, oh, nightmare. But it's a distractor because this was simply a hypothetical scenario at the beginning of the story and nothing else. Somebody is asking a question. Being on board a plane, non dovremmo mettere of a plane. No, on board a plane. Yeah. No, I think it's correct. But thank you for your question. Okay, moving on then, shall we? We're moving on to the Lexis in context part, because we're going to have another 5 questions. And again, it's going to be text, so full on texts that you're going to have to read, slightly shorter based on the old exam, so between 60 and 90 words. You will get, or at least you got in the old exam, words underlined in the text. So it should be easier for you to see them, right? And then you'll get questions about these words. And one thing that you're going to have to remember is the importance of 2 things, the co-text and the context. The co-text are the words surrounding the expression. So if they ask you about a specific expression or word, you're going to want to be careful and mindful of the words immediately before and after that word, because that will help you understand what it means in that context. But of course, you're also going to refer to the context, so the broader meaning. Does the word make sense, or does the option make sense in the context of the broader meaning of the text? Okay. I've analyzed the questions, quite a lot of the questions, and the main kinds of focus of the questions were verbs by a landslide. So there were a lot of questions about verbs, obviously, because they are among the key content words, right? The words that express the content of a sentence. This includes phrasal verbs, and I have a whole thing about phrasal verbs for later. There were nouns and there were adjectives. So obviously you can expect, since this focuses on specific lexes in a text, you can expect it to be about those words that give meaning to a sentence, right? So mainly the verbs, the nouns, the adjectives, that kind of thing. So let's try our hand with the first one, shall we? If you need me to speak slower, you can send me a private message on Zoom. Please do. Right. I think we can probably stop here for this one, because the correct answer was C. Adjusting in this text, and also in general, means changing their behavior appropriately. Okay. In this case, as you may have noticed, it wasn't a big deal that the word was in the context of a whole text, in the sense that you could have just read that particular sentence and been able to answer this question, all right? This is not always the case, but it could be, so that will allow you to save a bit of time. So the other options are just irrelevant. Thinking about something new, making the decision to move abroad is irrelevant to the co-text, because when abroad, students not only have to study while adjusting to a different educational system, means that they are already abroad. Okay. So the co-text is just enough really to read that sentence to understand that this option is just irrelevant, it's incorrect. Okay. Right. People are asking about the slides. Yes, the slides will be, they're already in the group chat, but I'm going to send them again in a minute. Let's move on to the next question, shall we? Okay. I can see that most people have already given their answer, which is indeed option C, extremely frightened. Note that in this particular text, option B, transformed into stone, literally, it does mean petrify, but it's literal. We don't really need a literal interpretation of the word petrified, kind of, we don't really need a Harry Potter sort of interpretation of the word, okay? What can we learn from this question? First of all, that we have two opposites here. So we have option C, extremely frightened, and option D, not at all scared, which are opposites, and one of them was right. So this can happen. Another thing to remember is be careful with negatives. So you might have some options that are phrased in the negative, you want to be particularly careful with those because they're more difficult to process in your mind, especially when we're a bit agitated. And the third observation I have is that if we don't know the word, the second part of the text can help us get it. So in this case, you may have known petrified, and I imagine a lot of you knew petrified, but maybe you may not have known it, and that would have been fine. In this case, reading the second part of the text would have helped you. So her parents, however, tried to encourage her to persevere. So it gives you that sense that petrified is something negative that Seren's parents were trying to help her with. If we know the word, the other lesson for me is that if we know the word, we don't really need to read the full text. In some cases, it might just be enough to read the first part. I'm not encouraging you to not read the full text because the text is objectively not that long, okay? But if you get to the end of your exam and you don't have a lot of time available to you, then it might be an option. Desperate measures, so to speak. Right, moving on. Okay, that was 1:15 roughly. Do tell me in the chat if you need more time. But I'm seeing that there's a lot of answers already. So the right answer was indeed option A. Somebody's asking if it could be option C. So let's look at the different options and why they're incorrect. So a labour shortage, a reduction of available teachers, B, reduction in teachers' working hours. Not really, because labour means working people. So forza lavoro, kind of like forza lavoro in Italian. So it's not about the hours, it's about the number of people, really. C, teachers being too ill to work. Interesting. And somebody asked, could this be the right option? And my answer is, it's subtle, it could be a bit tricky because it's a possible cause of the shortage, right? Because we're talking about Omicron and COVID, and the teachers, sorry, the schools were forced to cancel classes when teachers communicated they were sick. So you can see that there's a connection there. So it's distracting because it relates to the second part of the sentence. But labour shortage doesn't mean that teachers or any employee is sick necessarily. It means that there are too few working people available. And then the teacher's limited competence, that's just completely irrelevant. It's just there to make you waste your time, essentially. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. But if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or in the comment section if you're watching the recording. And please, after you put your answer in the chat, can you also put some language that you want to remember from these texts? Because this is a learning opportunity. So it could be a good idea for you to do this. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, that was 1 minute 10 seconds, by the way. And of course, the answer was have spread successfully. And here I would encourage you to look at the word itself, flourish, which might remind you of flower, might remind you of fiorire. Okay. Remember as well that traditional models that have flourished over the past 200 years in many parts of the West have remained remarkably fixed. So obviously, by logic, if they have declined or attracted no attention, or if they have not been adapted widely, then there would be nothing to remain fixed. Okay, that's also an issue of logic. Options B and C are almost synonymous. Option A is not synonymous necessarily, but it still describes a lack of decrease in uptake. So it's something negative anyway, just like B and C. And so based on the code text and the context, my question is, does it make sense to choose one of the three negative options, or are we better off choosing the positive option? So have spread successfully. And this is a way that you could think about the logic of how you answer this question. Not because you don't know, obviously, most of you got the right answer. It's more of an issue. It's more an issue of what strategies could you apply in the future if you do end up having a text with a word you don't know. Okay. Next one. Okay. The answer is, of course, frustrated by. And what can we learn from this question? First of all, we have the same kind of dynamic. I don't know if you noticed that we had with the previous questions. We have 3 positive options in this case and 1 negative one. We had 3 negative options and a positive one in the previous question, but kind of the dynamic is the same. Something to learn from this, I think. Second, even if you don't know what fed up with means, here we can see the importance of the code text and the context. how could people and organizations be happy or pleased or satisfied with cyberbullying, right? And then the following, well, kind of the end of the sentence says, finding solutions. And then the next sentence again goes, finding a solution. Why would there need to be a solution if there wasn't a problem? So if there wasn't something negative. And then the last lesson I think we can learn from this is that some questions are objectively easier than others. And I've tried to include a bit of a mixture of simpler and more complicated questions in this webinar, but this to me is fairly easy, even if you don't, not easy per se, not easy, but easier than others, even if you don't know the meaning of, to be fed up with, I think, for just the topic and the context and the context help you see that it cannot be something positive. Okay. So I think whoever wrote these questions has been a bit nicer than other times. Somebody's asked a question, Julia, so you suggest to choose the answer that is always different from the other three in most cases? No, I'm not suggesting that you choose it. I'm suggesting that if you don't know a word, a strategy can be to try to at least understand the sentiment of it. Is it a positive or a negative one? Okay. And in a lot of cases, you'll be able to do this, okay? And then when you look at the options and you have kind of the luck, I think, in this case, to see that 3 are negative and 1 is positive, and you've identified the sentiments behind the word being positive or negative, then that is a guide for you to choose, right? Okay. Let's move on to the third part of this webinar, the third kind of question that we'll look at today, which is grammar and Lexis. Now, again, we don't know that we'll have exactly these kinds of questions in the exam, but I think it's definitely a possibility. Before I move on, Rosanna is asking a question which I've already answered in the chat, but I'll answer it again. Do you think this webinar is appropriate for candidates of the concorso AB24? Yes, it is, because the multiple choice quiz is the same across the board. It's the same for everyone, including the English teachers. So you'll get exactly the same questions as everybody else. You'll be at an advantage, of course, because your English level is higher. So you'll be at an advantage with it, but it's still a good idea to get a sense of the format and the strategies to use. So yeah, definitely a good idea to be a part of this. In the last concorso, we had these questions that were separate. So you had some grammar questions, and then they were separate from Lexis questions. Okay. What you had was grammar questions that didn't refer to a whole text, but just a sentence in most cases. And what did they focus on? I've analyzed the prove scritte from the concorso ordinario, and of course, by a landslide, the most recurrent topics were verb tenses, or they were related to verbs. This included verb tenses, future, present, past, the use of the gerund versus the infinitive, so whether we use the ing form or the to form, specific structures like used to or be used to, all of that. The reported speech, the conditionals, and then there were other things that were not verb related, like modifiers and intensifiers, like the use of verily, extremely, things like that, and linking words that we use to link different phrases or different clauses, such as therefore. Sorry. And then we had the Lexis questions, which included things like prepositions, idioms. So idioms are fixed expressions. I'm sure you'll all remember It's Raining Cats and Dogs from your school days. Not that it's very widely used, but yeah, that's kind of an idiom. Collocations. What does collocation mean? It means when two words go together in a language, and we'll see what that means in a minute. And then the infamous phrasal verbs, which I know that a lot of you are worried about, so we'll have an aside just to talk about phrasal verbs, because I know you're worried. Okay. Somebody's asking me to explain the difference between used to and be used to, and I will do that in a minute, related to actually one of the questions that we're going to look at. Okay, so I'll do it in context. Right, let's start then. I'm going to give you less time for these, but still a bit of time. Okay, yeah. As many of you got correctly, it was indeed B. Don't forget to contact me if you need to change the time of our meeting. I've added a few notes here. So option A, don't forget contacting, sorry, me. Could this work? So could we ever have forget with the ing form? Yes, we could actually. Not in this sentence because it would make no sense. But in a different meaning of forget, yes, we could. So we use forget with the ing form to make sentences like this. I will never forget visiting the Taj Mahal. It was breathtaking. So forgetting an experience. For forget or remember, it's the same thing. We use with the ing form in this sense here to refer to an experience that we've had. Okay. To contacting, so option C, again, I have another question. Does the to plus ing form ever happen? Because you could tell me, you know, it doesn't sound right. Don't forget to contacting me. And no, it doesn't sound right in this particular instance. But to plus ing does actually happen after structures like look forward to and be used to. So I look forward to meeting you, not to meet you. That's one of the most common mistakes that I see from Italians, especially. And being used to. Also, once the ing form. Somebody asked me to explain the difference between I used to and I am used to. And I'm sure a lot of you could explain this to me, so it'd be really lovely if you could share an explanation in the chat, because explaining things makes us understand and remember them better. But in short, I used to is a structure that we use to talk about a habit that we had in the past that we no longer have. So I used to go skiing in the Alps when I was a child. I didn't, by the way, I can't ski. But anyway, I used to go skiing every summer in the Alps when I was a child. I don't do that anymore because I just learned that I hate skiing. I don't know why I chose this example. I hate skiing. I'm sorry, I'm really no good at skiing. But yes, so a habit that we had in the past. And that we don't have anymore. And when we use this structure, we have the infinitive, just I used to go skiing. I used to wake up really early when I went to high school. But now I don't anymore because I live close to my work, for example. And then we have being used to, and here the meaning is different. It's not just the form, it's not just the fact that grammatically the structure requires the ing form, so I am used to doing, not I am used to do, but it's also the meaning that's different, because it means literally, guys, in Italian, essere abituati a. Okay. So we can use it in the present. For example, I am used to hearing my daughter cry at night when she wakes up. Okay, I wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to this at the beginning, but now I am. Or I could use it in the past. I got used to, or I got used to her crying very quickly. I could use it in the future. I don't know if I will, yeah. For example, if I say, okay, this is true. I've just moved back to the UK, and I feel like I'm not used to the bad weather yet, but I think by, I don't know, in a month's time, I will be used to it. And I will be used to walking around in the rain. Okay, sarò abituata. And that's just a different meaning to, I used to go skiing as a child, which if we want to translate into Italian, we could do with the word solere, solevo fare. It's very formal, but it's a way of remembering it. If any questions, any issues, please put them in the chat. It's really difficult explaining these things without a board. Could have used the board. Right, moving on. Okay. We've got a lot of answers. Okay. Most of them are A, and the right answer is indeed A. Try to avoid giving the secret away this time. Want to organize a surprise party for her. This is what I was saying before. Sometimes they'll give you questions about, once again, gerund versus infinitive. This is simply a verb that takes the ing form. As you know, some verbs take the ing form. Other verbs that take the ing form include consider, dislike, feel like, finish, give up, miss, practice, recommend, suggest. There's a few that take the ing form. But another thing I wanted to point out about this, about the dreaded phrasal verbs, even if you don't know this phrasal verb this time, who cares? You know, all you need to answer this question is really the grammatical knowledge that avoid wants the ing form. So you don't need to know each and every phrasal verb ever to answer all the questions, which I hope can make you feel at least a bit better. Okay. Okay. I can see a lot of answers agree that it's B, and it is B. Okay. This is an example of the conditional, as you already know. If I became a member of parliament for the next general elections, I would put a lot of money into education. A is incorrect. If A were correct, then we would have to have something different than became, right? What would we need? Notice how I've asked a question in the conditional about the conditions, very meta. Yeah. Yeah. If I had become, se fossi diventato, I would have put a lot of money into education. Avrei investito, messo. Okay. But in this case, it's a lot less hypothetical. So se diventassi, almost as if it's, you know, it's more of a possibility. If I became, se diventassi, parlamentare alle prossime elezioni, I would put a lot of money. Metterei o investirei, ok? Antonio is saying, in this case, this is a second conditional. Yes, this is a second conditional indeed, yeah. If it were option A, then it would be a third conditional. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got a lot of answers. To play, yeah. When I was in my teens, I used to play the piano every day from 2 till 3. Like I said, this is a habit in the past that no longer happens in the present. As you can see, I'm not a teen, so ipso facto, it doesn't happen anymore. I used to play the piano every day. Be careful. The only thing I think that can confuse you here is literally if you get confused between used to and am used to, so be used to or get used to, which won't the ing form. But like I said, that's a different meaning. So if you're unsure about it, look it up. And if you can't find sources to look it up, send me an email, I'll send you some. That's the only way that you can get confused with this. Or if you do it in a rush and you don't see the particle to and you think it's already in the question, and then you just put option C. That's another thing that could happen. Okay. Okay. Hasn't decided. Be careful with the spelling. This is another one of those things that can confuse you if you're doing things in a hurry, which you might be if you get these questions at the end of the exam. Hasn't decided. Here you're missing the D. Okay. This is literally the only thing that can confuse you because you have she, and so haven't is for a plural. It's for they, not for she. Okay. Right. This is option B, which is the present perfect continuous, as I'm sure you know. Very good that you got it right. I have a follow-up question for you. If I had the option, I have waited for your call for ages, would that be correct? I have waited instead of I have been waiting. So I have waited. Some people are saying correct. Some people are saying I would stick to have been waiting. Both are true. Okay. So I have waited for your call for ages is technically correct. It's not the option I would use either, just because I have been waiting for you, you know, I want to put the accent on the duration, so I'm going to use the ing form to put that stress on the duration. But technically, and this is one of those things that if I were writing the questions, I would put in the exam, is the use of the present perfect, not the present perfect continuous, because that's fairly clear, I think, but the use of the present perfect in the sense of what we in Italian would use the presente semplice for. And so the present perfect, I have waited, when it's followed by for or since, it translates presente semplice in Italian, quindi ti aspetto da. I have waited for 3 hours, or I have been a teacher for 10 years. Sono un insegnante da 10 anni. I've been a teacher since 2014, whatever. Sono un insegnante da 10 anni. So if you have any spare time and you're wondering what should I revise in English, this is one of the things that you might want to revise in English, is the present perfect. It's one of the most common mistakes, and also because we know that they like to focus on things that they know that people get wrong, you know, the frequent mistakes, and the present perfect is one of those frequent mistakes for Italians, because we don't have a present perfect used in the sense of, you know, I have done this for a duration of time or since a point in time. We don't have that dimension in Italian. So it's something that we have to think through kind of to get it right. Okay. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. Now, okay. Lots of similar answers. Good. Okay. So that. Careful with spelling, because so than is only one letter. That's different from so that, which is the right option, means così che, kind of. Option C, such as is actual English, it's good English per se, but it's the wrong meaning in this particular sentence. Okay. An example of one with prepositions. I'm seeing some very different answers from people. Okay. We've got a mixture of A's and C's, a D. Okay. Okay. Excellent. At. In is a common mistake, and it's an interference of our first language. Bravo in matematica. In English, you're good at something or bad at something, and so you're excellent at something or awful at something. Yeah, I've seen in used as well, but the point I'm trying to make here is that mistranslations are something that they might want to put in. So rather than mistranslations, errors occurring from interference from our first language are things that they might want to put in, that I would probably put in if I wanted to be very naughty, because they know the first language of most of the candidates, and that's a strength and a weakness as well. So watch out for these things. Okay. And now, Okay, so we've got a mixture of different options here. The answer is D. He was thrown out of the gym for being drunk. Now, aside from the meaning of being drunk in the gym, which I would invite you to consider because I find that really interesting, why is A incorrect? Because to throw something away means to put it in the bin. And you wouldn't normally throw people away unless we meant it in a metaphorical sense, perhaps, but you throw your rubbish away. Okay. Thrown out of no, because you would need a preposition in this case. So you need of, not off. So just be careful with spelling. Read it in your mind because I think if you read it in your mind, he was thrown out of the gym, thrown out of the gym for being drunk. I think it'll make sense as well. So don't forget to read things in your mind if you have two very similar options, similar sounding options, especially. Thrown out the gym. This may be acceptable in spoken English, by the way. I was surprised to see that this was an option because it may be acceptable in spoken English. I wouldn't put this in a multiple choice quiz because people could appeal. But yeah, but this is it. He was thrown out of the gym for being drunk. So this was a grammatical issue, and this was a meaning issue. Also a grammatical issue because it doesn't make grammatical sense. It was thrown away. You would have to say from the gym, perhaps, but it wouldn't make sense in the sense of the meaning, okay? Because you throw things away. So that brings me to a word of warning about the so-called phrasal verbs. In short, what I mean to say is not everything is a phrasal verb. An example, the verb throw. Look at these examples. I caught the ball and I threw it to my mate. Can you throw it in the bin, please? Or I'm going to throw away my old clothes. The meaning of the verb throw itself doesn't change. Have you noticed how throwing, it doesn't really change. So you'll see on a lot of websites, even books actually, they would call these phrasal verbs. They're not. If you look at the last example, my son threw up his dinner. It wasn't very nice. This is a phrasal verb because the meaning changes completely. To throw up means to vomit. Why did I choose such an example today? Well, because I thought it would be memorable. It's disgusting, but also memorable. Okay. This is a phrasal verb. This is something that changes the meaning of the verb throw. Okay. And so my lesson with this would be that not everything that has a preposition next to it is a phrasal verb. Okay, and so it's not something you have to memorize because a lot of people have been asking, why don't you do a session about phrasal verbs? I have a lot of reasons for that. And the main one being that there's so many, and memorizing them in the space of a few weeks is an impossible task for anybody. But also because I just want to make it clear that a lot of these verbs are simply, they're not phrasal verbs, and they're not entirely new meanings that you have to memorize. And I would invite you, and you'll find this in the slides, to read this guidance from the ELT concourse about what is and what isn't a phrasal verb, and so it's not worth memorizing. But if you do feel that you want to find out more phrasal verbs and memorize them, then there is a list, more of a scientific take on this. It's a list of the most common phrasal verbs according to Norbert Schmidt, who's done this research based on corpus data. And so he's compiled this list. But again, lists of the most common phrasal verbs vary from 100, 150 to over 400. So I don't imagine it's something you actually want to take up and spend all of your time with. But people have asked me, and so here are the sources that I think you could find useful. Right. Mhm. Okay. Yeah, this is an example of one of those sort of idioms and fixed phrases that might be the subject of some of these questions. So in this case, it would be mind. The first thing that crosses your mind. Okay. To cross your mind is just something that you kind of have to know, or you can work out as well, based on it's sort of the context. But in this case, if you don't know this, you may be perhaps looking at the two kind of couples. There's two pairs in these options, mind and brain, and then idea and thought. So that's kind of your starting point to go by exclusion in a sense. Which of the two pairs do you think makes more sense? And then pick one of the words in the two pairs once you've decided that. Okay. Moving on. Coming to the actual phrasal verbs. Mm. Okay. Okay, very glad to know that there's no panic anywhere. Cut down on the amount of coffee I drink. It's not always the case, but with phrasal verbs, we can sometimes find a meaning in the second part of the phrasal verb. In this case, you have across, up, down, and in. Down implies literally something that goes down. In this case, cut down on the amount of coffee. And if you think about the co-text, so we're talking about coffee. Is coffee good for you? Not good for you? It's not really good for you, is it? So you want to reduce its amount. Yeah, like Lorenzo is saying, to reduce the amount of coffee that you drink. Most people would probably want to do that. They're also not teachers. So, but that aside, there are ways to find the meaning of not the meaning perhaps, but at least the sentiment behind a phrasal verb by examining the co-text. It's not perfect. Of course, it's not perfect, but then nobody can know all the phrasal verbs that exist in English, right? So sometimes you're just going to have to try with these little strategies. Okay. Okay. Right. The option that is correct is indeed B. Can you find any synonyms? Do you know any synonyms of sacked? Sacked is quite harsh, by the way. Language. Fired. Yeah, fired. Absolutely. Dismissed. Or, again, with, all the phrasal verbs, laid off as well. And in this case, we have two positive options, which are promoted and rewarded. But then we have the word risk, and then we have the co-text sent home with no jobs, which nobody can think, nobody can think it's a good thing. I mean, it would be a good thing if we had money to survive on, but nobody can think of, being sent home with no job as a positive thing, sort of. So if you're trying to work out the sentiment of what you're looking at, you're probably looking for something that's not positive, like promoted. This is retired. Option C is incorrect grammatically, because you're not retired by someone else, you just retire. Okay. So it doesn't go in the passive form. It's not transitive to do that. Okay. And finally, okay, I see that we've got the right answer down, which is indeed suggested. Told would have been incorrect because you tell someone. John told Sarah or something. Spoke is passive, is the past of speak. You speak a language, for example. And then presented is just a bit it's just a bit odd. It's a bit irrelevant to what John is doing, which is making a suggestion. Before we finish, since we haven't touched on the reported speech explicitly, can you turn this into the reported speech for me in the chat? So John suggested, and then it's a bit tricky, but John suggested us. There's no us. There's no he might be just the one person. John suggested to go out. John suggested going out. John suggested going out. Yeah, some people are saying that. Yeah, John suggested going out for dinner that night. That night, because we don't know. Yes, exactly. Lorenzo is saying that. That night, we don't know when they spoke. Okay, another option. John suggested that we should go out. Okay, it's a possibility. I still feel like it adds more meaning than it should, in the sense that there is no should in the original sentence. So technically it'd be John suggested going out that night. Okay, right. We've got some final pointers that I wanted to give you just to summarize what we've done today. And also this is an opportunity for you to put your questions in the chat. So if there is anything that you want to ask about what we've discussed so far, any grammar or Lexis or anything that you want to discuss or add, please, this is your time to put it in the chat. Okay. Final pointers to reach your goals. First of all, be careful with plausible distractors. Distractors, so the options that are there to distract you, are supposed to be plausible, so they're well written. Be careful with them. Just because an option is well written doesn't mean that it's the correct one. Distractors, learning how to write distractors is literally part of the job description of a question writer, of an item writer is what we call them. An item writer is the person that writes multiple choice quizzes. Again, be careful with word hooks, peculiar words that they want you to go looking for. Don't get hooked on these words. Negative questions and double negatives as well. So sometimes in the question you have none or not. Be careful with that. Don't miss it, okay? Partially correct answers. Sometimes, as we've seen, it's only a part of the question that's correct. Be careful whether they're asking for the author's opinion or a fact. If you've got a content comprehension question, a reading comprehension, be careful with the difference between these two. Be careful with your background knowledge. Do you are you answering the question based on the content or based on your background knowledge, just because you know that that's a fact? Well, in the English questions, you shouldn't be answering questions because you know that things are facts, but because you can see the answer in the text. Frequent mistakes can be used as incorrect answers. So one thing you may want to do is keep a record of your frequent mistakes or the frequent mistakes that you hear other Italians make, because those could be the subject. I would use them probably as the subject of the questions. Be careful when you have some answers where the opposite is true. So maybe the answer is very well written, and maybe it reminds you of words that you've seen in the text, but it's literally the opposite that's true. And that may be signaled by just one word in the option. The answer may be at the end of the text, the answer may be at the beginning of the text. And also finally, and I know this is unnecessary, but be careful with spelling mistakes. I've seen this happen because you're in a rush. If you get the English questions, especially at the end of the exam, you'll be tired. You'll just want to get out of there. You won't have a lot of time because maybe you've wasted a lot of time thinking of other questions. Be careful with the spelling. Don't miss out on points when you know the answers, because I know that you know the answers. Thank you for joining us. I just wanted to show you the links. If you want to exercise more, there's if you want to practice these exercises more, then you've got the prove scritte, which are available for free on the website of the ministry. And then you've got the YouTube channel where you'll see this recording probably tonight already. And I'll put in all the links and everything you need. You've got some grammar explanations as well there. I've chosen a link. There's many links, obviously, but I find that this is one of the most effective ones. So it's literally a list of topics, of grammar topics with explanations and exercises. So it's interactive as well. If you are doing our courses or not doing our courses, you can see Unit 9 that prepares you for the English questions, where you'll find explanations, quizzes, and 3 recorded grammar webinars where me and my colleagues, Andre and Rachel, have talked about the most common grammar topics at the B2 level based on our experience. So you've got the link there. There's still a coupon that you can use at the minute. So if you haven't got it yet, this is another source that you can use. And if you have any questions, please put them in the everybody's saying thank you, and you're very welcome. I mean, thank you for coming. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And also, a lot of people have been asking me about the oral exam, and so I just wanted to reassure you that we are thinking of programs for your English, whether you are an English teacher or you are another classe di concorso. I don't know why, but people are thinking a lot about the oral exam, which I didn't expect. But we will be doing 2 programs to prepare you for the oral exam. Obviously, the AB 24 and 25 and BBO2 are going to be more complex because you'll have questions on content and also lesson planning in English. That's a lot more articulate. The other classi di concorso will have some generic questions in English at the B2 level, so that's a bit lower, but you still want to prepare for them. So you can sign up for updates. I've set up a page where you can put in your email address, and then you'll receive an email when it's ready. But for now, focus on your written exam, and I just want to say best of luck, everyone. I hope that this was useful. And just, let me know how it goes. And if there is any other questions or anything else that I can help you with, okay? Somebody's asking, very useful. Okay, I'm glad it was useful. Will we organize another webinar in the next few days? No, I don't think so. But all the information is available on our website. And I would encourage you, to be honest, to to download all of the prove scritte because they're available. You know, it's a nice way of practicing, I think. We don't know for sure, of course, that they will be the kinds of questions that you're going to get, but you know, it's obviously a good way of preparing, I think, for the kinds of things that they could ask you. This is the link if you want to sign up to hear about the oral exam. It's, you know, just put your email in there. Somebody's asking, I missed the webinar on IT. Is it possible to see the recording? Yes, you can see the recording. Just go to our YouTube channel, which some of you may be watching right now, because we had 1,600 views in 48 hours. Dr. Scaglioni is very happy with that. Okay, so thank you, everybody, and good luck. Okay. All right. See you soon. And good luck with everything. Bye, guys. Bye-bye.